"Do you have a mate?" the Lycan king asked. She whispered, "Not yet," and he snapped with jealousy. The night was quiet, but the forest spoke in whispers of wind through ancient trees. Moonlight spilled over the moss-covered stones, turning the dark paths silver. In this shadowed kingdom, people feared the forest. They said it was alive, that it remembered betrayal and punished the unwary. Yet, Alara walked carefully, her basket swinging lightly at her side, her eyes scanning the ground for rare herbs. She had heard the warnings all her life, but she had never been afraid, not truly. Her village relied on her. Alara was a healer, gifted in ways the common folk could not understand. She knew which plants could mend broken bones, which flowers could ease fevered dreams, and which roots could soothe aching hearts. Tonight, the moon was full, and the herbs she sought bloomed only under its silver glow. The air smelled damp and wild, full of life unseen. Alara felt the forest watching her, but she kept her steps steady. Her mother had warned her of the Lycan king, Kale. Stories of his wrath traveled through villages like wildfire. They said he was as tall as a tree, with eyes like the deepest night, and teeth that could tear through iron. But most terrifying of all was his control over the wolves. They said he could call them with a single thought, and they would obey him without question. She had never seen him, never heard his voice, except in the stories whispered around firelight. And yet, tonight, a part of her could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. As she reached the heart of the forest, the moonlight grew sharper, spilling over a clearing where the air itself seemed heavier. That was when she saw him. Kale stood like a shadow carved from stone. His black hair flowed to his shoulders, and his eyes gleamed silver under the moonlight. He was taller than she imagined, with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to command the very trees. Around him, wolves circled, silent and watchful, their eyes glowing faintly like distant stars. Alara froze, her heart hammering. The stories had not done him justice. The air between them seemed alive, charged with something she could not name. "You should not be here," Kale said, his voice deep, calm, yet carrying a dangerous edge. "The forest does not forgive the reckless." I am only gathering herbs," Alara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "For the sick, I mean no harm." Kale's eyes narrowed. He stepped closer, and the wolves shifted with him, a silent reminder of his power. Humans often say they mean no harm, and yet they wander where they do not belong. "How do I know you speak the truth?" Alara swallowed hard. She could feel the pull of his gaze, heavy and demanding. "Because it is true," she whispered. "I only heal." He tilted his head slightly, studying her as if trying to read her very soul. The silence stretched between them, thick with tension. Then, almost casually, he asked, "Do you have a mate?" The question shocked her. Her breath caught in her throat. She had heard of the Lycan king's temper, his jealousy. To ask such a question was dangerous. Alara's lips trembled, but she answered softly, "Not yet." Kale's eyes flashed, and the air seemed to shift. A low growl rose in his throat, though he did not step closer. "Not yet," he repeated, his voice tight with something she could not name. Jealousy, possessiveness, desire, all mixed in a way that made the blood in her veins stir. I do not understand," she said carefully. "I have no mate, no one." "Yet," Kale said, each syllable heavy. He turned abruptly and disappeared into the shadows, the wolves following silently behind him. Alara's heart raced. She did not know whether to feel fear or fascination, or perhaps both. For the rest of the night, she gathered her herbs quickly, sensing eyes on her from every shadow. By the time she returned to her village, the sun was beginning to rise, and the forest seemed to sigh behind her, as if it were pleased or amused by her survival. Days passed, but Kale did not leave her thoughts. She tried to focus on her work, on the sick and wounded villagers, but every rustle in the wind, every shadow passing in her peripheral vision made her pulse quicken. She knew she had seen him, truly seen him. And part of her feared that once the Lycan king had noticed her, she could never go back to the way things were. Then came the rumors. whispers that Kale had been seen near the village, watching from a distance, wolves moving silently through the trees. A chill in the air that made mothers clutch their children closer. Alara felt a strange mixture of fear and longing. She was drawn to him, even as she feared what his presence meant. One night she could not sleep. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, spilling silver across her small home. Something compelled her to leave. She felt the forest calling, not with words but with a pull deep in her chest. She followed the path she had taken before, her basket empty this time, her heart full of anticipation and dread. The clearing appeared as she remembered, bathed in moonlight. And there he was, Kale, standing motionless, waiting. The wolves at his side did not stir. It was as if time itself held its breath. "You return," he said simply. Not a question, but a statement. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, held a weight that made her heart ache. I felt I needed to see," Alara admitted, her voice barely more than a whisper. I cannot explain why." Kale's lips curved, almost imperceptibly. "Humans are often drawn to things they fear," he said, "but sometimes they are drawn to what they need. Perhaps you are both." Alara's cheeks flushed. She had never spoken like this to anyone. She felt exposed under his gaze, yet safe in a way that terrified her. She wanted to step closer, to touch him, to feel the strength he exuded, but fear held her back. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then, in a motion that seemed both deliberate and effortless, he stepped forward. The wolves shifted, closing the space between them, forming a silent barrier of silver-eyed guardians. "You should not come here again," he said, though the words sounded more like a warning wrapped in concern than anger. "The forest is dangerous, and his voice faltered slightly, though quickly regained its firmness. "I am dangerous." "I know," Alara whispered, her heart racing. "I know you are, but I cannot help it." Kale's gaze softened, a brief flicker of something he rarely showed, perhaps longing, perhaps admiration. Then just as suddenly it hardened. "Then you will be careful. Or the forest may claim you before I do." Alara's breath caught. There was a strange promise in his words, one she did not fully understand. She nodded, though she did not move away. The moonlight wrapped them in its silver glow, and for a moment the world seemed to shrink, leaving only the two of them and the forest that watched silently around them. Without another word, Kale turned, disappearing into the darkness, leaving the forest echoing with the faintest whisper of his presence. The wolves lingered for a heartbeat, then melted into the shadows as well. Alara stood alone in the clearing, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She had faced the Lycan king and lived. But more than that, she had felt something dangerous, thrilling, and unexplainable. She had seen the man behind the legend, and she could not forget him. That night when she returned home, she found a single wolf's claw lying on her windowsill. Not as a threat, she realized, but as a reminder, a silent claim, a warning, a promise. The forest had not forgotten her, and neither had he. Alara could not sleep. She sat by her small hearth, the firelight flickering against the walls, thinking of the forest, of Kale, and of the unspoken bond that had already begun to form between them. Her heart ached with longing, with fear, and with a curiosity that would not be denied. And somewhere deep in the forest, Kale watched. His gaze pierced the trees, searching for her even when she was out of sight. His jealousy burned quietly, a fire beneath his calm, and yet there was a part of him that could not turn away. She had touched something in him that had been buried long ago, and he did not know whether to protect it or destroy it. The moon rose higher, full and bright, casting its silver light across the land. And in that light, two hearts, one human, one Lycan, were drawn together, bound by a tension neither fully understood, yet neither could resist. The forest held its breath, the wolves waited silently, and the first threads of a dangerous, powerful, and inevitable bond were woven under the silver moon. The castle of the Lycan king rose like a dark mountain against the horizon. Black stone walls climbed high into the night sky, and jagged towers glimmered faintly under the moonlight. Around it, the forest curled like a living serpent, its twisted roots and branches keeping intruders away. Few humans dared approach, and even fewer returned. Alara stood at the edge of the forest, gazing at the fortress with a mixture of awe and fear. Kale had summoned her. She did not know why, only that he wanted her in his presence. Her heart raced as she took the first step toward the castle, her basket now empty, though her hands trembled with anticipation. The gates opened silently before her arrival, as if the castle itself recognized her. Wolves, their eyes glowing silver, flanked the entrance. Alara kept her eyes forward, refusing to show fear, though her pulse thumped loudly in her chest. A guard stepped forward, a Lycan noble whose expression was both curious and wary. "You are the healer," he said. "The king waits for you." Alara nodded. "I am here to serve," she replied. Her voice was steady, but inside it trembled. The grand hall of the castle was unlike anything she had imagined. Shadows danced along the walls, thrown by braziers of blue flame. Tapestries depicting battles between humans and supernatural creatures hung beside portraits of Lycan kings long gone. Every corner of the room seemed alive, breathing with an ancient, silent power. At the far end of the hall, Kale stood, tall and commanding, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Even from a distance, she could feel the tension radiating from him, sharp as the steel of a sword. "You came," he said, his voice low and dangerous, carrying both surprise and approval. "I came because you asked," Alara replied, bowing her head slightly. "I do not know why, but I am here." Kale's gaze held her like a hunter studying his prey, though there was no cruelty in it, only curiosity and something else she could not name. "You have courage," he said, stepping closer. The air around him seemed to thrum with power. "Few humans would walk willingly into my halls." Alara's breath caught. "I do not fear you," she whispered. Kale paused, studying her. His eyes softened, if only for a fleeting moment, before the familiar edge of dominance returned. "Do not be foolish," he said, though the warning seemed as much for himself as for her. "This castle is not safe. You may think you are prepared, but the world here, it does not forgive mistakes." Alara nodded, though her curiosity burned brighter than her caution. "I have learned to survive in the forest," she said softly. "I have faced things no one else has." Kale tilted his head, intrigued. "Perhaps, but surviving is not the same as understanding." He stepped closer still, and Alara could feel the heat from him even across the distance. His presence was overwhelming, yet she did not step back. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, feeling a thrill that both terrified and thrilled her. "You have no mate," he said suddenly, almost a statement, yet edged with something darker. "And yet you walk in my halls as if you belong." Alara's heart fluttered. "I belong where I am needed," she said, "and perhaps I am drawn here for a reason." Kale's eyes narrowed, a flicker of jealousy crossing his expression. "Drawn here for a reason," he repeated, his voice low, almost a growl. "You speak as if you have a choice. Humans do not often understand the danger of their presence." "I understand more than you think," Alara said quietly. Her words surprised even her, carrying more confidence than she had intended. "I know the forest is alive. I know its dangers, and I know its power." Kale studied her in silence, his gaze intense, searching her face as if trying to read her soul. Then slowly he nodded. "Perhaps you are different," he said. "Perhaps you are needed here. But know this," he warned, his voice hardening. "Once you step fully into my world, there is no turning back." Alara did not flinch. "I do not fear the unknown," she said softly. "I fear only leaving things undone." Kale's expression softened again briefly, and something almost imperceptible passed through his eyes, longing, admiration, a shadow of something human beneath the Lycan king. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it vanished, replaced by the familiar mask of power and control. He turned, walking slowly toward the throne at the end of the hall. "You will stay," he commanded, though the words were calm, almost gentle. "I will need your skills here." There are injuries that require your hands, and there are questions that require your mind. Alara followed, her steps measured. Every movement in the castle seemed weighted with power. The wolves lined the path silently, their eyes gleaming in the firelight. They did not move aggressively, yet their presence reminded her that she was in a place where rules were different, where survival depended on understanding forces beyond the human world. Kale's throne was carved from black stone and adorned with silver, reflecting the moonlight through the tall windows. He gestured for her to sit, though he remained standing, his posture commanding and tense. "Tell me what you see," he said. "What you notice about this castle, about my people, about me." Alara blinked, surprised. I do not know what you mean," she said carefully. "You notice everything," Kale said softly, almost a whisper. "Humans often overlook details. They see the surface. You do not. And that is why I summoned you." Alara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. His attention was overwhelming, yet she did not look away. "I see what I must," she said. "I do not know if I see everything, but I see enough to know that something is wrong here. That someone or something is in danger." Kale's eyes darkened. "There is danger," he admitted, his voice low. "Always, not all threats are visible. Not all enemies wear armor or carry swords. Some are curses that linger, some are secrets that fester." Alara's curiosity burned brighter. "Curses," she whispered. "Secrets." Kale's gaze softened, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his composed exterior. "I am bound," he admitted. "Bound by a spell older than any of us. Bound by duty, by power, by a past that haunts me." Alara's heart ached at the sight of him like this, so human, so trapped beneath the mask of the Lycan king. "Then let me help," she said softly. "If I can." Kale's eyes flashed, a mix of admiration and warning. "You would risk yourself?" he asked. "I would," Alara said. "If it means protecting what is right or helping those who cannot help themselves." Kale studied her for a long moment, silence stretching between them like a living thing. Then he nodded. "Perhaps you are braver than I expected," he said. "Or perhaps more foolish." Alara met his gaze, unwavering. "Perhaps both," she said quietly, a faint smile brushing her lips. Kale's lips twitched, almost like a smile, but it did not reach his eyes. "We shall see," he murmured. "The night is young and the forest is full of secrets. And soon you will see things no human has ever seen before." Alara's chest tightened. She did not know whether to feel fear or excitement, perhaps both. But one thing was certain, she could not turn away now. She had stepped fully into his world, and there was no path back to the ordinary life she had known. The days that followed were filled with tension, lessons, and subtle closeness. Kale observed her constantly, testing her skills, her courage, and her resolve. He challenged her, pushed her to confront dangers, yet never touched her directly, at least not in a way that made her uncomfortable. Still, every glance, every movement carried an unspoken charge. Alara learned of the castle's hidden dangers, traps left to protect the throne, wards against enemies seen and unseen, and the restless spirits of Lycan ancestors who had not found peace. She moved carefully, always aware of Kale's watchful eyes, always aware of the pull between them that neither fully acknowledged. Then came the night of the blood moon. Kale summoned her to the highest tower, the wind whipping her hair around her face, the moon painting the stone floor silver. "You are ready," he said, standing close, the heat from him warming her even against the chill of the wind. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Alara swallowed hard. "I do not know," she whispered, "but I am willing to try." Kale's hand brushed against hers, lightly, almost unintentionally, and the spark between them ignited. He drew back quickly, his jaw tight, his eyes stormy. "Do not mistake caution for weakness," he warned, his voice low and rough. Alara nodded, her heart pounding. "I understand." But as the blood moon rose, casting an eerie red glow across the castle and forest, a distant scream echoed through the night. Someone was in danger. Without thinking, Alara turned, ready to run toward it, but Kale's hand caught hers, firm and possessive. "We go together," he said, his eyes blazing. "No one touches you and no one dies without my knowledge." Alara nodded, heart racing. She realized then that she was not just a healer. She was a part of something greater, something dangerous, something that demanded courage beyond her imagination. And beside her, the Lycan king waited, watchful, powerful, and impossibly close. The forest was alive with whispers. Every tree, every rustle of leaves, seemed to speak secrets only the brave or foolish could hear. Alara moved carefully, her basket now forgotten, as the wind carried a scent of something ancient and powerful. Kale walked beside her, silent and commanding, the soft glow of moonlight casting silver highlights on his dark hair. The blood moon from the previous night still hung low in the sky, and the forest seemed charged, like a living creature. Wolves padded quietly around them, their eyes glinting like distant stars, and the air hummed with magic. Alara had learned to sense it, though she did not fully understand its depth. The forest, the castle, Kale himself, everything pulsed with forces that demanded respect and courage. "You feel it, don't you?" Kale asked softly, his voice low enough to be a part of the night itself. Alara nodded. "Yes, it feels alive, watching, waiting. I can feel something pulling, as if it wants us to move forward or to stumble." Kale's gaze softened, though only briefly. "The forest is a mirror," he said. "It shows us what we fear most. It forces us to confront ourselves, and sometimes it tests what we desire most." Alara's heart fluttered. Every time he spoke to her, every time he drew near, she felt a pull stronger than the forest itself. She could not deny the danger, nor the strange, unexplainable longing that made her chest ache. They reached a glade where the moonlight fell like silver rain, revealing ancient stones arranged in a circle. The air smelled faintly of ash and something older, like history itself had seeped into the soil. Kale stopped, placing a hand on one of the stones. "This is where it began," he said quietly. "Long before my rule, before the curse that binds me, this place was sacred. It is a place of power and pain." Alara stepped closer, her fingers brushing over the cool stone. "What kind of pain?" she asked softly. "And what curse?" Kale's eyes darkened. "I am bound by a spell, older than the oldest of my ancestors," he said. "I cannot love freely. If I allow myself to choose a mate, if I let my heart be fully known, it could destroy those I am sworn to protect. That is the curse that binds me, the curse of power, the curse of the throne." Alara's chest tightened. She had glimpsed the weight he carried before, but hearing him speak it aloud made it real. "Then why me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why call me here? Why bring me into this?" Kale's expression softened, vulnerable for the briefest moment. "Because I sense something in you that I have not seen in anyone else," he admitted. "A courage that matches the forest itself, a strength that could survive what I cannot. And perhaps because I cannot resist you." Alara's breath caught. The words sent shivers down her spine, a mixture of fear, desire, and wonder. She had sensed their connection, the subtle pull between them, but to hear him speak it aloud made the world shrink to the two of them, to the silvered glade, and to the thrum of something dangerous and irresistible. Kale stepped closer, the heat from him brushing against her, his presence overwhelming. "But you must understand," he said, his voice low and fierce. "If you stay with me, if you follow me deeper into this world, there will be no turning back. The curse, it tests everything. It will try to break us." Alara's eyes met his. "I am not afraid," she whispered. I cannot turn away now." A moment passed, stretched thin by tension, desire, and fear. Then Kale's hand brushed hers, soft, tentative, and electric. It was a touch that carried both warning and promise. Alara's chest fluttered, and she realized she had never wanted anything so completely, so dangerously. "We move forward together," Kale said, pulling his hand back reluctantly. "Or not at all. The curse will test you, Alara. It will show you your darkest fears and your deepest desires. The forest around them shivered, the shadows twisting as though alive. From somewhere deep in the glade, a faint whisper drifted on the wind. "Beware," it seemed to say. "Beware the heart that loves the cursed." Alara shivered, but she did not step back. "I am ready," she said firmly. "Whatever it takes." Kale's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable, torn between the beast he was forced to be and the man he longed to reveal. He wanted to pull her close, to shield her from the curse, to claim her fully, but he also feared the consequences. "Very well," he said finally. "Then we begin." The first trial came swiftly. As they crossed deeper into the forest, shadows began to twist unnaturally, forming shapes that moved independently of the wind. Wolves barked softly, uneasy, as if sensing the malice in the dark shapes. Alara tightened her cloak around her, though Kale's presence beside her offered a strange comfort. "Do not be afraid," he whispered, his hand brushing hers again, just enough to ground her. "These shadows, they feed on doubt and fear. You must face them or they will consume you." Alara nodded, trying to steady her breath. She closed her eyes for a moment and reached into herself, recalling every lesson, every herb, every story her mother had taught her about courage. When she opened them, the shadows were still there, swirling like black smoke, but she felt steadier, stronger. Kale's eyes were fixed on her, intense, as if measuring her resolve. "Good," he said, "but strength alone is not enough. The curse tests hearts, not hands." Suddenly, the shadows formed a figure, a twisted, shadowed version of Kale. It mirrored his movements, his gaze, even the faint scar on his cheek. Alara's breath caught. It was as if the forest had pulled the king from her imagination and made him a phantom of darkness. "You see now," Kale said softly, his hand finding hers again. "This is what I fight inside myself every day. My own fears, my own darkness. And if I let them rule me, they could destroy everything I care for, including you." Alara's heart ached at his words. "Then I will help you," she said firmly. "I will face it with you." The shadow moved closer, its form flickering between Kale's human shape and the beast he could become. Alara felt a wave of fear, but she held fast. Kale squeezed her hand, grounding her. "Together," he whispered, "no matter what comes." With his guidance, she stepped forward, facing the shadow directly. It lunged, but she did not flinch. She held her ground, her mind steady and her heart open. Kale roared, not a sound of anger, but a roar of defiance, and the shadow faltered, dissolving into mist. Alara stumbled slightly, her heart racing, and Kale caught her. His arms were strong around her, protective and possessive, and she felt a strange warmth, a security she had never known. "You are stronger than I thought," he said, his voice low and rough. "Perhaps stronger than I am." Her cheeks flushed. "It was not just me," she whispered. "It was us." Kale studied her, his gaze intense. "Yes," he said softly, "it was us." They continued through the forest, the trials growing more complex. Each test forced them to confront fears, regrets, and hidden desires. Alara learned the depth of Kale's loneliness, the isolation that came with power, the weight of the throne, and the curse that had kept him from love for centuries. And she saw the man behind the king. A man who longed for connection, for trust, for someone to see him not as a ruler, not as a beast, but as himself. For his part, Kale was drawn to her courage, her compassion, and the light she carried even in darkness. He struggled with the desire to protect her fully, and the fear of bringing her into the dangerous world of his curse. Every glance, every touch, every shared moment deepened the bond between them, though neither spoke of love yet. They could not until the curse itself was faced. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, where the first light of dawn touched the trees, both were exhausted. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, and the first birds began to sing. But even in the soft light, the tension between them was palpable. Kale stopped, looking down at her. "You have done well," he said softly. "Braver than anyone has a right to be, but the curse is not over. The trials you faced tonight were only the beginning." Alara met his gaze. Then I will face whatever comes, she said, with you. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Kale's lips. Perhaps we can survive this together, he murmured. For a moment the world seemed still. Two hearts, one human, one Lycan, beat together in the quiet dawn. But the forest around them whispered warnings. Enemies, secrets, and the darkness of the curse itself were still waiting. The peak of the moonlit mountain rose before them, jagged and stark against the silver sky. The wind whipped around Kale and Alara, carrying the scent of pine, stone, and something older, something alive. Every step toward the summit was a test, the mountain itself seeming to resist their progress. Stones shifted underfoot, shadows twisted like living fingers, and the air vibrated with magic. Alara's hand was firm in Kale's, their fingers entwined. Each step was heavy with the weight of destiny, the pull of the curse, and the unspoken bond that had grown between them over countless trials. Her heart pounded, but she did not falter. She had faced darkness before, yet the trials here, so close to the source of Kale's curse, felt unlike anything she had known. "This is where it began," Kale said, his voice low and steady. "The first pact between humans and Lycan rulers. The place where power and love were tested long before either of us were born, and it is here that we must face the curse itself." Alara nodded, her gaze fixed on the jagged summit above. "I am ready," she whispered. "If it takes everything, I will not turn away." Kale studied her, the wind tugging at his hair and cloak. There was pride in his eyes, but also fear. "Once we step onto this mountain, the curse will test not just our strength, but our hearts," he warned. "It will force us to confront every fear, every regret, and every hidden desire, and it will ask a question that cannot be answered lightly." Alara's breath caught. "And if we fail," Kale's jaw tightened, "then everything we care for, our bond, our world, our lives, could be lost." They began the ascent. Every step brought a new challenge. Shadows clung to the rocks, whispering doubts, fears, and memories. Alara saw visions of herself alone, powerless, unable to protect those she loved. She saw Kale as the beast, uncontrollable, raging, and beyond reason. Each vision tested her resolve. Kale remained close, a steady presence beside her. He faced his own visions with a mixture of restraint and raw emotion. Memories of lost mates, betrayals, and the centuries of solitude pressed down on him. The curse sought to turn their fears against them, but Kale and Alara held fast to one another, drawing courage from the bond that had grown between them. At the midpoint of the climb, a chasm opened before them, dark and yawning. A single, narrow stone bridge stretched across, slick with ice and mist. The shadows on the other side shifted unnaturally, forming twisted shapes that seemed to leer at them. Kale's eyes met Alara's. "This is the moment," he said. "We must cross together, and we must trust completely in one another." Alara nodded, heart hammering. She took his hand firmly, feeling the warmth and strength that had become a lifeline to her. Step by step, they moved across the bridge. Each movement tested their balance, their courage, and their trust. The shadows reached for them, whispering doubts and fears, but neither spoke. Their eyes locked, their breaths synchronized, their hearts beating together against the darkness. Halfway across, a gust of wind threw Alara off balance. Kale caught her immediately, pulling her close. For a moment their faces were inches apart, and the world seemed to hold its breath. "I will not let go," he whispered, his silver eyes glinting in the moonlight. Alara's pulse raced. "And I will not turn away," she said softly. The bridge held. Shadows receded. They reached the other side, their hands still entwined, their bond stronger than before. At the summit, the mountain opened into a circular plateau, ancient stones carved with symbols that glowed faintly under the moonlight. This was the heart of the curse. The air was thick with magic, humming like a heartbeat. Kale stepped forward, his posture tense but resolute. "Now," he said, his voice carrying authority and vulnerability all at once, "we face it." The curse manifested as a darkness that swirled in the air, taking the shape of Kale's deepest fears and regrets. The shadows were jagged, echoing every loss, every betrayal, every moment he had been forced to live alone. They lashed at him, threatening to consume his mind, his heart, and his body. Alara stepped forward, placing her hand on his arm. "You are not alone," she said firmly. "I am here, I am with you, and I will not leave." Kale's eyes met hers, silver and stormy, and for the first time he allowed himself to fully trust her. "Then let it see us together," he said. "Let it test the bond it cannot break." Alara nodded, closing her eyes for a moment. She summoned all the courage and strength she had learned in the forest, in the castle, and on the mountain. She opened her eyes, meeting the darkness directly, and together they faced the shadows. The darkness lashed out, but Kale and Alara stood firm. Every attack, every whisper of doubt, every vision of loss or despair was met with their combined strength. They held hands, their hearts aligned, their courage unwavering. For hours it seemed the shadows would never end. But slowly the darkness began to falter. It recoiled at their unity, unable to pierce the bond they had forged. Kale's roar echoed across the mountain, not in anger, but in defiance and release. The shadows dissolved into mist, leaving the moonlight to shine fully across the plateau. Kale fell to his knees, exhausted, his chest heaving. Alara knelt beside him, her hands on his shoulders. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." Kale looked at her, eyes glistening with something softer, something human. "No," he said quietly. "You did it. You carried me through what I could not face alone." Alara shook her head. "We faced it together," she insisted. Kale's lips curved in a faint, real smile for the first time in centuries. "Together," he agreed. The curse was broken. Not entirely, for its echoes would remain in the world, but its hold over Kale's heart was lifted. He could now choose to love, to trust, and to live without the constant shadow of fear and isolation. They stood together as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The mountain, once dark and forbidding, now shimmered with silver and gold. The forest below stretched endlessly, alive and vibrant, and the castle gleamed faintly in the distance. Kale turned to Alara, his gaze lingering on her face. "You changed everything," he said softly. "Not because of your strength alone, but because of your heart. You reminded me that even a king, even a curse, can be redeemed by love." Alara felt tears prick her eyes. "I only followed you," she whispered, "and you let me in." Kale stepped closer, his hands brushing hers. "I had no choice," he admitted. "I have never known another like you, never someone who could see past the legend, past the beast, and into the man I have tried to hide for centuries." Her heart swelled. "Then let us leave the past behind," she said softly. "Together, let us start anew." Kale's eyes softened and he took her hand fully, holding it as if he would never let go. "Together," he echoed. The wolves appeared at the edge of the plateau, silent and watchful, yet there was no threat in their eyes. They bowed their heads slightly, a sign of respect, before fading back into the forest. Kale's connection with them had changed, just as he had changed himself. He was no longer bound entirely by fear, anger, or isolation. He was free to choose, and he had chosen Alara. As they descended the mountain, the sun rose fully, spilling golden light over the world. The air smelled of pine, flowers, and new beginnings. The bond between Kale and Alara was no longer tested by shadow or curse. It was tempered by courage, trust, and love. They returned to the castle together, hand in hand, their presence changing it as much as it had changed them. The halls that had once seemed oppressive and dark now carried a quiet warmth. The wolves, once silent and watchful, moved with a sense of peace, and the courtiers looked upon Kale and Alara with respect, not just for the king and the healer, but for the bond they had forged. In the quiet moments, Kale would look at Alara and see not just a human, but the heart that had saved him. And Alara would look at Kale and see not just a king or a beast, but the man who had finally learned to trust, to love, and to be free. The forest, the castle, and the mountain all seemed to hum in quiet approval. The curse had been faced, the darkness endured, and two hearts had been bound in a love that was both powerful and gentle. And though the world beyond would continue with its dangers, its secrets and its shadows, Kale and Alara now faced it together, stronger, braver, and unbreakable.